Bruchim Abayim to the 14th and continuing series of lectures on the 13 principles of the Rambam Maimonides. And we're going to begin with the Yesodei HaTorah. First of all, I want to wish everyone who is not in a Ir HaMukaf, or Krach, a Freilichen Purim, a happy Purim. And those of you who are in a Krach, a Ir HaMukaf, a Freilichen Purim tomorrow. And those of you who don't know where you are, or those of you who think that you're in both, then I wish you a Freilichen Purim both now and tomorrow. Mitzvah. Okay, fine. In any case, in the Yesodei HaTorah, the Rambam says, I'm once again reading from the Shilat edition in the Hakdama of the Rambam, the Perichelek, which is in the Shilat edition, as I said, on Daf Kuf Mem Daled, the last line. Yesodei HaTorah Habitul, which means what? That the Torah of Moshe will never be nullified. There will never come any Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu except for the Torah of Moshe, which means what the Rambam lists above. You said Hashmini means certainly the Torah Shabbat and those things which are the Teresh B'Perish B'Shem B'Ner who see themselves, the Devarim Mekubalim. Nothing will ever be added, and nothing will ever be subtracted. Neither that which is written in Torah of Moshe, and neither what's called the Perushim Mekubalim, as specified in the Yesod Hashmini. Amar in the pasuk, the pasuk here is explicit to the Torah in Devarim. Lo Yisayisef Olav Lo Yisiga B'Imenu. So the Rambam, in fact, actually refers us to the Psichas HaChibur, which is the Hakdama, is general Hakdama to the Mishna, which is also in the Shilat edition. There the Rambam, I'm going to be reading from, the Rambam speaks about the role of Nevi'im. And there the Rambam says, it begins a discussion on Daf Lamed Hey, that the Navi, of course, can order the Jewish people to either transgress a mitzvah, right? Transgress a mitzvah only l'shah, only for a certain period of time, but not permanently. And the Rambam goes on and says, nonetheless, if the Navi says that this mitzvah is to be cancelled permanently, then of course the affirmed, of course, is a Navi Sheker. Okay? And this is what the Rambam says. I'm now reading from Daf Lamed Vav. V'al zeh hekesh kol ma shetzavka bo yanavi. Kol ma shetimtze b'mikro b'tzivi yanavi aseset doven ha-mitzvahs. Right? Harei zayika hu mafteach l'chulai. V'zeh lavadei nidla navi mishab b'nei odom b'torah. Right? I will be ill of a hekesh with boins b'torah. Harukish achacham madim lo she'einem nevuah. Right? In other words, a Navi is no different than anyone when it comes to Iyur and Hekesh. In other words, the rational understanding of the Torah. I will be Yifarish Perush, Yifarish Bishainu Navi Perush. Right? V'yema Navi. For example, Hashem Ali Perushu Anocha. The Navi says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him that this is the proper understanding of the Torah. Lo nishma elav. We don't listen to him. Ela elaf Nevi'im kulam keleo v'elisha Yifarishu Perush. Right? If 1,000 Nevi'im, like Elul Navi, should interpret the Torah in a certain way, I'm in Daf Lamed Vav in the Shilat edition. Ve'elav Chachamim v'Chacham Yifarishu Hevach Zeh. And of course, 1,000 Chachamim interpret the Torah the very opposite of the Navi. Achrei Rab Lahatois, but right? V'lo k'divrei Elaf Chachamim ve'Achacham. V'lo k'divrei Elaf HaNevi'im HaGedolim. Okay? So in other words, basically, a Navi, right? So he says, Yitz Olom Abazeh, says the Rambam, Ki ein Tov Sefes, V'lo Chison B'Torah Mitzat HaNavu B'Shem Panim. In other words, one cannot add a tract to the Torah from a prophetic, from prophecy in any way. Which means what the Rambam is saying, I mean, it clearly implies it in the 9th Yesod, is that when the Rambam says that you cannot abstract to the Torah, he's speaking about al derech nevuah, through prophecy. Right? Right? That's what he means. The Navi claims that a Kodesh Baruch Hu said the din of one of the mitzvahs is as such. Or for example, a person makes a drasha based on one of the Yud Gimel Midas, and the Navi says, oh, God said to me that's the proper drasha. Oisya Navi Yumas. The Navi gets a death penalty, the Fishu Navi Sheker, because the Navi Sheker. There is no Torah after the first Shliach, namely Moshe Rabbeinu. So clearly, what the Rambam says in the ninth Yesod, that which is the Yesod of Bittul, Shezois Teres Moshe to Vata Lo Tovel Torah Meis Hashem Zulaso Lo Toisev Bob Lo Yigam Mimeno, as it says Lo Toisev Lo Yigam Mimeno. We're speaking about any extract of the Torah based upon the Nevuah. No, but nobody claims that Kodesh Baruch Hu told him to add subtract to the Torah. Okay? And then the Rambam brings the pasuk Lo Bashamayim. According to the Rambam, Lo Bashamayim is just coming to tell us that a Navi who claims that Kodesh Baruch Hu has told him a certain din of the Torah or an explanation of the Torah is true, right? In fact, that's Lo Bashamayim, and he's a Navi Sheker. So in other words, the whole din of Lo Bashamayim is really a din of Navi Sheker. Kodesh Baruch Hu has not allowed us to refer to the Nevi'im, but has told us to refer to the Chacham who are Anshe HaHekesh, people of reason. He doesn't say in Pasha Shaita you will go to the Navi. It says, okay, you go to the Shofet. Okay, which means basically is that the Yesod HaTorah is really come to tell us that after the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, no Navi can come and offer, not only offer any addition or subtracting from the Torah, but that can actually, in fact, rule or interpret any pasuk or make a drasha from a pasuk based upon Nevuah. That's really the Yesod HaTorah. And this is, we actually spoke about this last time. The Rambam in Paraches speaks about in Paraches, Rambam begins by speaking that every Navi comes out to Moshe. Yesodei HaTorah, right? That every Navi who comes out to Moshe Rabbeinu who gives an oath, we don't believe him, right? Because Einenu Shamanu V'lo Zar, as the Rambam says. Okay, but in fact, actually, the Rambam continues this in Parak Tes, in Parak Chi, in Yesodei HaTorah. And the Rambam Parak Chi Yesodei HaTorah actually presents us with actually the Yesodei HaTorah. Says the Rambam, it's interesting, Yesodei HaTorah is in Parak Chi, in Yesodei HaTorah. I'm sure the Gematrias people will find this interesting. Dava Bora Umufurash B'Torah, it's clear explicit in the Torah. She mitzvah omedes le'olam o'ilmei olamim. That's a mitzvah. The Torah is eternal. Eino lo shinoi lo giroin lo tesefes. Right? Shenema is called davar shenoich mitzav eschem. Oisoi tishmu lasois lo soisev olav lo soigra b'menos. The Rambam here brings the same pasuk and brings it in Yesodei HaTorah. V'nema v'nilos lonu v'neinu ad olam lo sois called divrei Torah azois. Halamarata, said the Rambam, we learn from these pasukim. Shekol divrei Torah mitzuvin ad lo sois ad olam. We're commanded to do all the words to do the entire Torah forever. Right? So the Rambam basically is telling us that the eternity of the Torah means that it's eternal in the sense that no Navi can add any more to the Torah. Lo bashamayim. Lefichach, im yamad ish ein Yisrael ben min ha'umah v'yasa oisu moifses. It's interesting the Rambam says, what's ben min ha'umah? So it comes to fuke oisu ish. Right? And he says that Kodesh Baruch Hu sent them to add or take away a mitzvah, or to explain a mitzvah, perush, an explanation, we didn't hear from Moshe Rabbeinu, so we cancel the mitzvah completely, and the mitzvahs were only for a certain period of time. This is a Navi Sheker. He's coming to contradict the Moshe Rabbeinu, etc., etc. Okay, So, in other words, so what are Nevi'im coming to do? So the Rambam says, what is the purpose of a Navi? So, says the Rambam, the purpose of a Navi is, right, is dasu, but he's not coming for really, for halachic purposes. It's coming, he's a mishkiach. He's coming to tell people that they should listen to the Torah. But he's not coming, in fact, to tell us new halachas. Okay? And this is in fact actually the this is the Shittas HaRambam. So we see clearly here in the Rambam that Yesodei HaTorah is basically speaking about Nevuah, which is very, very important, because how do we explain the fact that we see that Chazal make takanas and gezeras, right? Or even more so, of the Shittas HaRambam, how do we see that Chazal make so many drashas? Aren't they adding to the Torah? The answer is no. According to the Rambam, the prohibition of adding to the Torah is only a prohibition that's done b'derech ha'nevuah. The Navi claims that, of course, Baruch commanded him. But if Chachamim want to create new mitzvahs, they're welcome to do so.
So if you have a Chacham or a Navi, or say you have a Navi who says, who gives the exact same drush as a Chacham, just as it comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, it could be the exact same thing, exact same derivation, exact same, I don't know, from Yikkim Middles, whatever it is, but it could be the same halacha. It's just he's saying that it's coming from.
He's a Navi Sheker. He's a Navi Sheker. He's a Navi Sheker. Because Baruch doesn't tell Nevi'im drashas. He's a Navi Sheker. Now.
Well, the Rambam in Mammon, he makes a chiluk between whether the person who's making the halacha says that it's part of the Torah, or he says that it's like on top of what we have on making the new halacha. And if he says that this is a new halacha d'oraisa, new din d'oraisa, then it's like sifu.
No. Where's that? Parent bags? Parent bags? Okay. We'll go to that 1 second. I just want to, but this is in the Perek, because the Ma'aseh the Rambam holds all the bunch of d'oraisas anyway. But like this. What I want to do though is I actually want to speak about this in the very beginning of the Mishne Torah. After the Rambam's famous Hadama, there's a minyan of the mitzvahs. Okay? And the Rambam says at the very end of the minyan of the mitzvahs, he says, Elohim sheish mi'os b'shlosh mitzvahs shenemu l'Moshe b'Sinai. These are the 613 mitzvahs that were said to Moshe b'Sinai. Hein u'klalosein u'pratoseyim v'diktuheim. V'chol oisen ha'kol zafod ha'diktuheim aviyim k'kol mitzvitza yitosh v'apeh shekiblu bezdin mipi bezdin. Okay, so the Rambam lists all of the Taryag mitzvahs, okay? This is after the minyan of mitzvahs, in the beginning of the Yad. V'yesh mitzvahs acheros. There are other mitzvahs. Shenischachu acha matan Torah. There are other mitzvahs that were created after matan Torah. V'kavu oisa nevi'im v'chachamim. And nevi'im v'chachamim established them. You hear that? Nevi'im v'chachamim established them. Upashtu b'chol Yisrael, and they were accepted among the entire Jewish people. K'goyed, for example, and tonight is Purim night for many people. Mikra Megillah, Ner Chanukah, Tainis, Tisha B'av, Yadayim, Ve'eruvin. I'm listing here 5 mitzvahs that Chacham established. V'yesh l'chol mitzvahs ve'elu perushin v'dikdukin akoyis ba b'chibazeh. The Rambam says there are many details of these mitzvahs that explained in the Mishne Torah. Goes on the Rambam. Right? There's actually a paragraph of the Rambam that I'm sure no one knows about. Kol elu mitzvahs. Every year we discover a new part of the Mishne Torah. Kol elu mitzvahs shenischachu. All these mitzvahs that Chachamim created, chayav anu lekablam u'leshamram. We're required to keep them. Shenem, like it says, leisasim b'kol adava. Right? That's what the Rambam says in Perek Aleph in the Hilchos Megillah. Ve'enam teisefes al mitzvahs HaTorah. But they're not an addition. Here comes the Rambam and says, I'm violating the 9th principle. So the Rambam, no, it's not teisefes al mitzvahs HaTorah. Ve'alma yizir HaTorah lo yisosif l'sigara. Right? And it's not an issa of what the Torah says, lo yisosif l'sigara. In other words, the Rambam is addressing this issue. How come mitzvahs l'chabon are not a violation of the 9th principle? Shelo yin navi rosh l'chadish davole shekol boch tzivah mitzvah zu lo yisif from mitzvah Torah or l'chasa achs v'l'shosu mitzvahs, right? Right? Is that what a navi says? The Kodesh Baruch Hu has commanded me to add a mitzvah, subtract a mitzvah. Aval ibaysifu bezdin im Navi. If the bezdin was moisivit together with the Navi, sheba'isa zman, mitzvah derech takal, or derech chayra, or derech gezerah, ein zoy tosefes. It's not called a sefer. In other words, if the bezdin was added together with the Navi, it's not called a tosefes. Because when a bezin does it, since we're not Nevi'im, they're not going to say Kodesh Baruch commanded us to read the Megillah or to make an Eruv. I think I understand what he means is that if they would say that Kodesh Baruch commanded us, right, then Erechanami, that they'll be Meisif al Torah. But the fact is the bezin doesn't say that because it's a bezin, they're not Nevi'im. Elakech anu oimrim. But rather we say, Shanaviyim im bezdin tiknu v'tzivu l'kreis ha-Megillah boinasa. That the Nevi'im, together with bezdin, established to read Megillah boinasa. Okay, in other words, so very interesting. It seems over here the Rambam seems to have a problem with Kriyas HaMegillah. There's clearly a problem. Now, if you get Zmanim, John, Shakoyach. The Rambam actually mentions this in Hilchot Megillah, and the Rambam says in Parak Aleph of Hilchot Megillah, Parak Aleph, the Rambam says, "Kriyas HaMegillah b'zman mitzvos aseh midivrei sefer, v'adavom yeduim shitakalas nevi'im." So that's very interesting. So the Rambam mentions both things. He says it's a mitzvah aseh b'divrei sefer, which would indicate chachamim, but devom yedum shitakanas hanaviyim. Okay, first of all, before we try to understand the Rambam, and in fact, actually, the important thing is that what does the Rambam mean over here? That the bezdin the bezdin does it together with the Nevi'im. What exactly does the Rambam mean to say? Right? Is the bezdin is a rubber stamp? What is the Rambam communicating to us? Well, first of all, what I'd like to raise is how does the Rambam know this? What's the Rambam's Bakor? How does the Rambam know that, in fact, actually, Nevuah was mentioned, is involved in Kriyas HaMegillah? Now, the Gemara in Megillah, how nice it is that we get to learn this on Megillah and on Purim. The Gemara Megillah says the following thing. The Gemara says in Tav Bezim and Aleph in Megillah, the Gemara is going on the first Mishna, which says that the Megillah is supposed to be read on Af Yud Gimel Dal Tavav. Like John told me that there's a mitzvah from Daf Yud Aleph and Yud Beis, and the Rambam says, right? How could they add Yud Aleph Yud Beis? Because the Rambam. So it says the Gemara says Megillah Daf Bezim and Aleph, right? Michte, the Gemara says Kulo Anshe Knesset Gedolah Tiknunu. All these were established for Anshe Knesset Gedolah. The Isal Kedatach Anshe Knesset Gedolah Yudal V'Tezvav Tokun. Because if you say that the Anshe Knesset Gedolah will be saken just Yudal V'Tezvav, so as Rabbanon V'Akit Akante the Anshe Gedolah, how can the Chacham come along after and be oiked, do away with Anshe Knesset Gedolah? Vatnan Ed Beis Nyochel Avad Beis Delchaver. Them can't go to Chop of a minion. El Pshita Kulu Anshe Knesset Gedolah Takino. In other words, so the Gemara establishes very, very clearly that certainly the days of Yudal Tezvav, as well as Yudal Yud Beis, right, were established by the Anshe Knesset Gedolah. So this seems to imply that the Kana was actually a Bezdin, and not Nevuah. However, what's interesting is who were exactly Anshe Knesset Gedolah? Because the Gemara says in Daf Yud Zayin, Amud Beis, Amar Rabbi Yochanan in Megillah, all in Megillah, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, v'Amar b'Masnisa, Tana, Meya v'Esrim Zekainen, there were 120 Zekainen, Uvahem, Kamen Nevi'ah, and among them several Nevi'ah, Tiknu Shmonesrei Brachas Ala Seder. They were Masakin, they established the 18 benedictions of the Shemona Esrei, and the Gemara repeats this again on Daf Yud Chesed Ben Aleph, and this appears to be the Anshe Knesset Gedolah. Now, what were these? it would appear to be Anshe Gedola. It doesn't say explicitly Anshe Gedola.
That means that the Nevi'im were functioning as
yes, right.
Over here.
Not only that, but actually the Rambam says this explicitly in the Moreh Nevuchim. In the Moreh Nevuchim, and I believe we actually saw this Moreh Nevuchim. If not, it certainly is in a Rishimu article, which I wrote. The Rambam raises a question in Perek Nun Tes, chapter 59 of section 1, Perek Nun Tes, Chelik Aleph in the Schwartz edition. The Rambam is speaking, how could it possibly the Torah speaks B'Lashon B'nei Adam? How could the Torah use anthropomorphic descriptions of God? We spoke about that in the earlier weeks, right? So in other words, so he says, I mean, this is of course in the Torah, but what about in the Nusach HaTfilah? How is it that in the Nusach, in other words, how is the Nusach Tfilah, the Tfilah use descriptions of God, which of course, according to the Rambam, would violate, ostensibly, the prohibition of describing God with positive virtues. So the Rambam says, Ulam Mikaven, I'm on the last line on page 149 in the Schwartz edition. Ulam, says the Rambam, nonetheless, Mikaven Shabo Gam Anshe Knesset Gedola, the Anshe Gedola came along, V'heim Nevi'im, and they are prophets, you hear that? They are prophets, V'tiknu Sheteyamauna, Shaloi Shabila Magola Gimavonoi Betfila, Matrasino Iloima Oisem Bilvat. In other words, basically, the Nusach HaTfilah was established by the Anshe Gedola, which are who are what? Who are Nevi'im, and because of that, it was permitted to describe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, describe God with positive attributes. That's just like in the Torah, one could describe, we see descriptions of God with positive attributes. If you look at the Rishimu article, I have a long discussion what the logic of this is. But nonetheless, we see very clearly in the Rambam that the establishment of the Megillah was a takon of Nevi'im. Also takon of Nevi'im. Because the Anshe Knesset Gedola were the ones who established, and the others include the Nevi'im. I mean, the Rambam starts with the Nevi'im, and the source of the Rambam, in my opinion, is clearly Daf Yizayim Amud Beis, so Chesed Aleph, where the Gemara speaks about the establishment of the Tefillah, and the Gemara calls it 120 Zakenim, and among them several Nevi'im. Now, the fact is that this also appears to be a little bit of a sugya in Daf Zayin Aleph. Because the Zayin Aleph Megillah, too, the Gemara discusses that Esther and Mordechai wanted to have the Megillah written down. There was rejection from Chachamim, and then the Gemara, and they found the pasuk, and then the Gemara goes on and raises the question: is the Megillah Matame Yadayim, which means was it written Beruach HaKodesh? So clearly, in that sugya, in Das Zayin Aleph, there is an indication too that the Megillah is written Beruach HaKodesh. Right? I know you can distinguish it. I'm just saying, yes, from here it's clear a little bit that the
That's not the kind of Chacham and Nevi'im. I mean, all of the Sefer Kodesh were written.
No. The Gemara has a question. The Gemara has Akir Megillah was written Beruach HaKodesh.
I understand, but Yeshaya was written with Nevuah. That's not a it's the mitzvah of reading the Megillah. That's the Takana.
I hear what you're saying. I accept that, but the only thing is that, in other words, it could be Kisvul Teres means was made as a Ksav Kodesh to be written from, to be read from. In other case, okay, look, we'll put an asterisk by this raya. All I'm saying is, it's clear, and if you look at the objection to Chacham, they say, well, it's not in the Torah, it ain't something to the Torah. So it appears to be, in other words, if I read the Gemara inside, the Gemara says, Shalchol hem estel Chachamim kisvulu l'Teiras. Shalcholim, they wrote back to them, right? It says, Halo kasaptecha shlishim lo Nevi'im. That's Tanakh, but you can't have a Megillah. How do you understand the dialogue? What's the question? What's the answer? The question to me is let's be Meisif. Let's add another Ksav Kodesh, so let's read it.
In the canon.
I understand. The answer is no, you be Meisif al Torah. You're adding to the Torah. That's what I would say. Ad shematzla mikra, they dash in the pasuk, could play chacham dash in the pasuk. In any case,
but you could go also a step further.
You're right.
You could go a step further and say that if you say the Megillah is written Beruach HaKodesh, the mitzvahs of Purim we learn from the Megillah. includes mitzvah.
Right. That's an excellent point. In fact, actually, the Gemara learns it from in Beis on Beis from the Purim of the Megillah. But in any case, in other words, I understand that the shackle of Italia, the give and take in the Gemara there, is actually a give and take on what? In fact, the give and take in the Gemara is a give and take whether, in fact, you could be meisif on the mitzvahs. And first they said you can't be meisif the mitzvahs because you're a navi. And then they added back and said for some reason you could be meisif. They dashed the pasuk differently, but some of the pasuk was dashed not up the voah, but rather they dashed themselves, and they made a takana. In other words, that's the give and take. Right? So in other words, so the give and take of the Gemara is actually concerned with actually what's called the Yesodei HaTorah. Now, the fact is that, so in other words, what is, in fact, the Rambam can be to say, right, im hoisifu bezdim in a navi. What I would understand from the Rambam, right, is that the Nevi'im proposed that this be made into a Yom Tov, and it was but it was done with and finally, and like the Gemara says in Daf Zayin, and there was and they asked, and somehow at that time they took reshus for they had to get reshus, so the permission for the Chachamim, and the Chacham agreed to it, and they made it into a mitzvah. In other words, the initial reading of the Megillah was generated probably by Nevi'im. But then the Chachamim gave their permission, they gave their haskama, right? They gave their haskama, right? And that becomes a Mitzvos Aseh.
The prophets means Mordechai and Esther.
Yeah, right. That's what I say. Mordechai, even though Mordechai was not a nothing, but whatever it is, it was based upon Nevuah. In other words, so what do we see? The interesting thing is, we see that the takana of Purim, unless I'm going to go out on a limb now right now, the takana of Purim represents an interesting takana where, in fact, there seems to have been an end of the era of Nevuah and an assertion of the power of Chachamim. That's what I want to claim.
This is Rabbi Tzadok Kain, Kimu v'Kiblu.
I'm sure. Kimu v'Kiblu. Peiches ben Aleph, right? Peiches ben Aleph, when it says Kimu v'Kiblu, and like the Medrash says,
In Shabbos.
Tanchum Shabbos, Tanchum says, going on Teresh B'Yal Peh, it's mashbid until Purim, you still have Nevi'im making takanas. And then comes along, Kimu v'Kiblu, with the Makayim, that in fact actually the takanas could only be established by Chachamim. In other words, that was the Kimu v'Kiblu of Purim. So, in any case...
So does that put the Rambam where he says that a Navi can't be Machad or something is after Purim, but before the Purim?
It would seem to be... So I want to claim it could possibly be that this was a... this din was actually a later din. In other words, this din...
You saw this Ikkar.
No, it's an Ikkar. It is an Ikkar. No.
This ninth Ikkar is the later edition?
No. So the question is the question could possibly be is that the Nevi'im did it, but they made it did on on a part-time basis. I'm not sure. In other words, it seems to be that before this Nevi'im did make takanas, but somehow
we have examples. Shoti Ken Eleno. We have examples of the.
No. But for example, some of these things are not missing the Rambam. For example, the good question is how come the Rambam doesn't bring halal as a takana de Rabban? The answer is because it says in Kufiyat Zayin but Aleph from Sachem that it was a takana of Nevi'im. Nevi'im was Sachem, and every tzaddik should say halal. The other doesn't appear in the Rambam. A takana of Nevi'im is not called a takana for eternity. What?
But if the Rambam Zikr did not apply before Purim, there were no Nevi'im after Purim. That's the end of the soft.
What?
Purim is the end of Nevuah.
Purim represents the end of the Nevuah. It would seem to me that it would seem to me.
The end of Nevuah. The end of there are Nevi'im after Purim. Ezra.
Well, it's no. The Nevuah really ends with the beginning of Bayesheni. This Chadani is Chayv of Malachi, the beginning of Bayesheni. But it's the beginning of the end of Nevuah. Even though in Merabah it says that when Alexander Macedonia came, and certainly during this period there seems to be a transition from Nevuah to Chachma.
It doesn't have to mean the end of Nevuah. It means the end of the authority of Nevuah.
Whatever, authority of Nevuah. That's a dick. The Ikka thing I want to say is. It might appear from the Rambam. Look, in other words, we could say at least in the Rambam that there were mitzvahs that were somehow generated by Nevi'im. The Nevi'im came up with them. And then Chacham had to give their haskama. Otherwise, it's something which is not a, it does become something that it's not a requirement. No. Oh, wait. So in other words, so this is what the Rambam is speaking about. In other words, it's clear that the Laws of Megillah, Purim, right, was something that was generated by the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im came up with it. And then, but it's only when the Chachamim gave their haskama to become Mitzvos Lo Taaseh. And that's what the Rambam means. The Rambam means, when the Rambam says in Hilchot Megillah, Bizman aseh midivrei sofer, v'adavam yeduim shitakanas nevi'im. In other words, it was really the Kam Nevi'im with the Chachamim made into a Mitzvos Lo Taaseh. But without the Chachamim Mitzvos Lo Taaseh, we're not required to do it. We're not required to do it. Now, the question is, how do we understand this, though? In other words, if the Nevi'im were proposing that it be a forever thing, they're Navi Sheker. It's a Navi Sheker.
Wasn't that Esther's question?
So you have to say Kisvud L'Doros means Esther made like a 1 day, a 1 year holiday. The 1 year holiday. In other words, the Nevi'im did it for that year. Or maybe for 2 years, whatever it is. They made a one time thing. But Kisvud L'Doros means they want to make it a permanent holiday. So for that, right, Chacham had to kick in and give their haskama. And this is in fact actually what the Rambam says later on in Perek Tes and also in the Parashat Mishnayos. The Navi could come and add a mitzvah, right, for a certain period of time. But he can't make it eternal. So in other words, what we have to say is that this is the safe reading of the Rambam, that the Navi in fact, the Navi can propose a mitzvah that's a one-time thing, right? That year in Purim, they made Purim, but in order to make it eternal, because for the Deiras, that they need a Chacham. And the Chacham is this is Asik. But the original Takana was the Takana on the Nevi'im. And then come on Chacham and make it into something permanent. Now, what I wanted to say, on a more dangerous note, was it could possibly be, but I guess this would be a strange violation of Gimel Ikkarim, or at least we would historicize the Gimel Ikkarim, that if actually Lo Bashamayim, he actually in the Meiri have done the Pirkei Avos, the Meiri clearly says is that certainly before the time of Chazal, the Nevi'im used to paskin based upon the Midas. In other words, the Lo Bashamayim, he was only a later thing during the beginning of Bayis Sheni. The Meiri says clearly that the Nevi'im used to actually paskin and used to darshan Midas, and the Meiri claims that, and the Meiri avad Adav is on Navi Sheker. Afterwards, based upon Nevuah. The Meiri says in the Hakdam of the Pirkei Avos, I think it was reissued in a separate volume. Meiri says that, and actually, I think the Mabit. I think I once saw Mabit in the Mabit has a sefer, Beis Elokim. There he says that actually the Nevi'im used to darshan the Yud Gimel Nevi'im used to darshan the Yud Gimel Midas. He says clearly like that.
That's okay if they're dashing Yud Gimel Midas.
No, they can't. There's a Navi, no. It's a Perush of the Torah, because Baruch the Rambam says Shechayor Navi Sheker.
It's explicit.
Right. In which case, you would have to say that the injunction of Lo Bashamayim was first issued in what? In Bayis Sheni. What?
Rabbi Eliezer, the end of Bayis.
Yeah, right. Because we see, right. Lo Bashamayim. In other words, no, which means, now the question is, does the Rambam...
He says the end of Bayis.
No, Rabbi Eliezer Rishuba was miles after the Bayis Sheni. At least 100 years.
No.
We're 600 years away from this.
No, for sure. No, Rabbi Yeshua the answer was after Bayis Sheni, but all I'm saying is,
it's the same generations.
No, it can't be. He's after Bayis Sheni. No.
It's hundreds of years away from
No, it can't be.
Yes, agree.
Rabbi Yeshua is a Rebbe of Rabbi Yeshua is a Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. It's the 2nd century.
Is it that?
Rabbi Zaka, who was at the time of the Churban.
Yeah.
So
okay, whatever it is, we could say, we coined the Meiri, and it's only according to the Mabit, right? Lo Bashamayim was a later thing. The Rambam, in fact, actually includes this as a nikah, though seems to be raise the question: does the Rambam actually hold like this? It could be the Rambam. What?
Why? I mean, the same way the Gemara understood it was to safeguard the new paradigm of non-prophetic Messiah.
Yeah.
Rambam could also be establishing it for the same reason.
And I understand that. The question is, what is the Rambam claim you give Ikkarim are actually there? I saw the claim Ikkarim were just basically, in other words, Ikkarim that developed during Bayis Sheni. That's the question I'm raising.
Do we have a right either way?
I don't know. No, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I mean, all he says is the Nevi'im and the Chachamim did it together. You're making a deal that before that the Nevi'im.
No. I'm referring to the Rambam says Hilchot Megillah. Because my business asked you to recite him, but the way you do him, shame to cut us the Nevi'im. What you do? It was really to cut us the. That's what I'm in the Rambam. It was really to cut the Nevi'im which the Chacham gave their gushpanka to. That's what I'm being back from the Rambam. So in other words, that can be interpreted in one of two ways. Either we give a conservative interpretation, the Nevi'im made a takana for a one-time thing, and then after that, Chacham made into Mitzvos Lo Taaseh. That's what Rambam is saying. Or we could say that in fact actually it was takana that later kicked in when Lo B'Shamayim.
But then you have to say Nevuah never stopped.
What?
Then you have to say the Rambam holds Nevuah never stopped.
Well, that's clearly everybody agrees that the Rambam. There's no indication of all the Rambam would never stop.
Because the whole Hakdama to Perish Mishnah is talking about Nevi'im what they can and can't do.
I understand that.
Talking about
No. So it has to be speaking about later on. Now, the fact is that the problem with this is that the Rambam is very clear in Perichez. If a Navi comes and says and gives an eyes, we don't listen to right. We don't. In other words, that appears to be a din Torah. I mean, it would be very, very difficult for me. Although, in fact, actually, a Navi Rosh Chodesh Davar is not brought in the Minyan Mitzvahs. I don't believe so.
But it's putting a positive for it.
It's a positive. It could be a drush of Chazal. In any case, look. Once again, there are many. No, the listeners are going to ask a kasha on me. The listeners are going to ask a kasha on me because, well, actually, look. If in fact, actually, in Yesodei HaTorah, where the Rambam lists all the psukim, the Rambam does not list the mitzvah of a Navi Rosh Chodesh B'Dava. Now, of course, some of the listeners are going to get very mad and say, "Well, there's a Gemara in Tzayin Malaf and Tabura. The Moshe Rabbeinu was nifta. Yeshua answered from him, and the Gemara says, "Lo b'shamayim, ein roich B'Dava," etc., etc. Okay, but that can be understood in many ways. I'm not going to go into right now. Okay, but the Rambam does not list ein roich B'Dava as being one of the. It doesn't appear in the. It's not listed in the mitzvah at the beginning of Yesodei HaTorah, which means it could possibly be a drosh of Chazal. The Rambam lists it as an Ikka.
Is it in the Sefer Mitzvahs?
No, it's not in the Sefer Mitzvahs. Because the Rambam begins to the Torah lists 10, and the Rambam doesn't. He says the Shema Min Hanavi Habadabi B'Shmai, but Eila Mitzvah, Sheinu Chodov, the Rambam doesn't list a separate mitzvah, which according to the Sheikh Sheni is clearly a drasha that's generated by Chazal, which could possibly mean Lo B'Shamayim was generated by Chazal during Bayis Sheni.
Because it's part of like the Sifon. Just the general Sifon.
Loisei Sifon. Loisei Sifon. In Hilchot Mamre, there's a Ram listed in the beginning of Hilchot Mamre with the mitzvahs of Loisei Sifon. The Rambam does list it. You're right. But I'll tell you the truth, I'm not. But the Rambam in Loisei Sifon and Hilchos Mamre doesn't speak about Nevi'im. The Rambam speaks about adding 5 tatafos, this and that, and everything. I'm not sure. In other words, the Rambam does bring Loisei Sifon. Right, but I'm not. The Rambam here doesn't speak about a Hasafa based upon Nevuah. He speaks about Yesodei HaTorah. Tzarech Bira. He answered the question. I mean, the question would be: is the Loisei Sifon in Hilchos Mamre and then that you can't hear it from a Navi? Or he says the klolim like adding, 5 tatafos.
So the lot of ein navi Roshayil Chadash V'Dover doesn't. There's no separate pasuk that the Rambam learns from. It's part of the Israel Sifon.
No, it's not. But it's not. It isn't in the Mishne Torah. It isn't. In the Mishne Torah, Eila Dvar Mishno Davar is Yesodei HaTorah. The Sifon is born in Hilchos Mamre, and there the Rambam. There seems to be a din. The Rambam, for example, speaks about adding to tofes, adding to the tzitzis, adding to the apaminim. It says
Base test.
what? Hoyel there's the base din l'gzor v'laso davar mutar. Right. Shlo lo yisiv al divrei Torah lo ligoyer. L'gaboya dor oilam shu min ater v'sav. Kozav protected right. B'yeshvu lamdu shizah kozav otavar shalachol basa b'cholav. אבל בשר אויב מותר בכל בית. אם יבוא בזן ויעתה בשר חיה בחלב, הרי זה גויריה. It's a din in Bezdin. Lo yisasiv. It's not a din in a novi or some davar. It could possibly be a totally different din. The Ram here doesn't bring a novi or roy l'chalish by davar.
But if it's a separate din, then it's it's part of framing the paradigm of the Messiah post.
This is my more liberal, radical interpretation of the Rambam. That actually this Ikra was really Nikpa and Bayesheni. Okay, but if you don't like radical interpretation of the Rambam where there's a alternative solution, the solution would just be that in fact, if we go back to the Rambam, there originally was a takana of Nevi'im. Although it's very interesting, for example, if we're speaking about takanas of Nevi'im, the most famous takana of Nevi'im is that of the Hishana. Shana Rabbah, the Katan Nevi'im, right? John, you're going to speak about that? Very good, right? And what does the Rambam say? So the Rambam actually speaks about this in Hilchos Lulav, and the Rambam says that you don't have to get it. The Rambam says over there is that in Perek Zayin Lacha Beis, the Rambam speaks about that they would bring the Hishana to the Beis Hamikdash, for the Beis Hamikdash, they would bring it every single day, and then the Rambam says. That after the Churban Abayis, right? Therefore they only brought it one day, and the Rambam says, right? Kol Shiva Yom Yechazel Ela B'Yom Hashvil Bovad, right? As in Halacha Beis, should not an oisem bezman hazeh. Case an oisem lekech bar echad or badin harbe chutz me'arova shvalulav v'choyvit bar akarka or lakli should dova zeh minhag nevi'im.
Minhag Nevi'im.
He says Minhag Nevi'im. Yeah, but no. Minhag is also a get of Loisosur. But for Rambam and Perek Aleph and Hilchos Mamre.
Doesn't it ask if it's Sukkah if it's a Minhag Nevi'im or Takanas Nevi'im?
It's a machlokes. There might not be the Gemara says LeBrocha, and then based on Aleph and Sukkah. But what I'm saying is that now you could say, if you really want to make this a Lamish shiur, which I think the shiur is coming too Lamish for Shachar anyway, is that actually what the Issa is, the Rambam says the Perish Mishnayis, in Perish Mishnayis, the Rambam, this is the Hadama to the Perish Mishnayis, the Rambam speaks about the Issa of Nevi'im, right? The Rambam speaks about the Issa of Nevi'im to make takanas and gezeras. He leaves out, the Lashon leaves out minhagim.
Page?
Daf Lamed Vav. I think he speaks about that, right? He speaks about looking things by Hekesh. And then I think he speaks about, right? No. Wait a second. Speaks of Perush. Okay. I remember there's a Lashon that Rambam speaks of Takanas and Gezeros. Maybe it's Paraches and Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah. Paraches. I don't know. The Lashon of the Rambam somewhere is Takanas and Gezeras. I remember that explicitly that he leaves out a minhagim. Right? Is it Ikkarim, right? Of the Ian is Bodis Patera Shachal Chamim. Okay, I don't know. Okay. I can't find it here. Okay, in any case, I think, we'll leave it as such. But, okay, now, so, to summarize is that the ninth Ikka, according to the Rambam, the ninth Ikka is coming explicitly to rule. The ninth Ikka is basically Lo B'Shamayim. The ninth Ikka is coming to rule out any mitzvah or any perish of the Torah, which the Navi, which is brought by Navi, and claim HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him that perish. There's the Navi shekel. It's not coming to eliminate new mitzvahs of Chachamim, and certainly not Perushim Chachamim. That certainly can be added to the Torah, and the Rambam says you can do so.
And the formation of a Sanhedrin today to do that would also not be excluded by the Rambam.
That's a different thing. The Kesef Mishnah raises the question. That's a different thing. The Kesef Mishnah and Hilchot Sukkah raise the question. The Rambam says that a Sanhedrin can overturn a Drasha previous Sanhedrin.
Right.
The Kesef Mishnah there says that Bisman that we can't do it. Right? It would appear the Rambam in Parak Beis of Rambam is speaking about a Sanhedrin, because we already see. I mean, it's clearly even from the Gemara that we see that even the Moraim didn't make new drushes, only Tanoim. It would appear to be the Ram held that drushes can only be made can only be made probably by Minhag. Tanoim is only not by after Chazal. We don't see that now that's not explicit to the Rambam, but because
in terms of takonis, it would leave the way open.
Well, takonis, yeah, that's. But I'm just saying is that in other words, the Kesef Mishnah says it, but because it doesn't bring up a core in the Rambam. In the Hakdama of the Rambam to the Mishne Torah, it seems to be evident that the Torah Shabbat basically is frozen after Chazal. Every takon and gezerah that's made after that, right, is not acceptable all of Klal Yisrael.
He gives a practical reason. He says because there was a haskama.
Right. But I think that's pretty clear in the Rambam. But where there's an explicit Rayan proof of the Rambam explicitly says this, it's not clear to me. But in any case, that goes on for now. The other second principle we have very interesting in the Rambam is that there were takanas of Nevi'im that were initiated by Nevi'im that later became a Mitzvos Lo Taaseh. Right? And that now the conservative interpretation would be is that the kanas were only for a one-time thing, or maybe a two-time thing, and Chacham converted that into a Purim Mitzvos Lo Taaseh. That's what Chacham said. The question that would be Megillah. That would be the understanding of Shacham B'Tayim Zayin but Aleph. The more radical, liberal interpretation that would be that the fact that Lo B'Shamayim, which is the ninth Ikka, was actually made axiomatic or in the Tama Bayeshenia. But that, of course, that is a much more liberal or radical interpretation of the Rambam. But the simple explanation is that the Rambam says that takanas of the VM could be transformed into what? Into Mitzvos Aseh of Chachamim. And that's clear in the Rambam. And actually, it might be interesting is that to go to the Mitzvos Aseh of Mitzvos Aseh the Rambam list, one could actually bring a raya that actually all of them were actually takanas of Nevi'im that later become Mitzvos Aseh of Chachamim. For example, even Chanukah, it says L'Shana Acheres Kavu, could possibly be that it was missing Nevi'im, and then it was nikba by Chachamim. For example, Netil Shadayim and Erevin L'Shlam HaMelech, that could have been during Nevi'ah and Nevuah, and after that takanas Chachamim. It would be interesting to see to explore how many of these takanas of Chachamim were initially takanas of Nevi'im, and later the Chachamim basically transformed the Mitzvos Aseh, which could suggest the fact, the more radical interpretation, that actually Klal Yisrael lived with takanas of Nevi'im, and after that the Chachamim somehow there was a change, either by Purim or by Chanukah. Akan is double Nevi'im become a Hatu Shma different Chachamim. That in fact there could be a reference here that in fact there was a turning point during Bayesheni. There was a passage from Nevuah to Chachma, and therefore kicks in the ninth principle. That's a possibility. Yeah.
Would with this whole discussion,
yes,
it's only Nevuah, does not apply to Ruach HaKodesh. Well, people say that Sefer Shulchan Aruch was written with the Ruach HaKodesh, therefore even if he makes a mistake in Lamdas, it's still true.
In the Rambam, I don't think the Rambam will be in, I don't think there will be a difference in the Rambam. I mean, Reb Tzadok would certainly be.
Does it make sense to follow something because it's written in a book that must have been...
In the Rambam, there's a well-known machlokes the Ramban and the Rabbeinu Bachir, where there's a get of Ruach HaKodesh that's higher than Nevuah. So, certainly the Ramban held is Ruach HaKodesh higher than Nevuah, in which case, I mean, that would justify that Reb Tzadok says the Ari comes along and argues on the halacha. There's no indication that the Rambam would agree to this. In fact, actually, in the Rambam, as we spoke about, Rosh Hashanah is the greatest seichel that ever existed. So, by inference, one would argue that if, in fact, there's Ruach HaKodesh that's higher than Nevuah, so therefore, Ruach HaKodesh is higher than Moshe Rabbeinu, like we explained in the Balatanya and the Ari, and therefore you can come to overturn Moshe Rabbeinu on certain types of things. But the Rambam, the Shitasa and the Yud Gimel Ikkarim holds Moshe Rabbeinu is the highest intellect, and therefore I would probably rule that out, that there's no... The spectrum of Nevuah would not reach as high as the Seichel of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what I would say. Okay, I think we'll stop over here. This will suffice on this Purim evening, Purim, from an undisclosed place in Yerushalayim HaKodesh, Freilich and Purim.